Last month, the Commonwealth Foundation announced the winner of their valuable annual Writers' Prize. This year's top award went to Canadian Lawrence Hill for his novel The Book of Negroes. It's a no-holds-barred account of the slave trade seen through the eyes of a slave girl from Mali. It covers her capture at the age of 11 by Africans, her long trek overland to Sierra Leone to be sold to British traders, the ghastly sea journey to Carolina in America, her toil on an indigo plantation where she's raped by her owner, and her journey back to Africa from Nova Scotia after she'd gained her freedom. It's an unending series of disasters. Her parents are killed, her children die, her friends die, and even when she returns to the promised land in Freetown, she discovers that slavery is still being perpetrated by Africans themselves. On the line to Toronto in Canada, I asked Lawrence Hill if he'd written the Book of Negroes out of anger.
No, it was written out of love. It was written out of the triumph of the human spirit and the courage of a woman of the time who could survive in capture and slavery and then liberation and still be a loving and deep person through her life despite these tumultuous horrors. And so, no, it was a book written out of love. There was no anger in the writing. It doesn't mean that occasionally I didn't feel some anger as I contemplated the history of African peoples and their treatments, but no, the book was written out of love.
It is a ghastly, brutal story, and not much nice happens in it, and not many people in the book are nice.
Well, I think the protagonist is a beautiful person, and I think she meets a number of people that are mixed human beings, as we all are. I say mixed in that they show good and bad qualities, which we all do. I feel that there are some wonderful people in the book. She does meet a few monstrous people, but from the standpoint of fiction, I think the more interesting characters to draw are those who are simultaneously good and evil.
But it's a story of murder, brutality, blood, torture, diarrhea, everything.
It is, but it's also, I think it's told with a lightness of touch and with light coming through the story. So I believe that it's told in a way that is readable and engaging, and I don't believe it's a depressing account. I believe that most readers report back to me that it's an uplifting story, not one of depression. And that's a very tricky thing, to write a story of such pain and, as you say, brutality, and not to bang the reader over the head with a hammer and to make them feel either uninterested or depressed.
But nobody comes out of the book terribly well, not even her fellow countrymen.
No, nobody comes out terribly beautifully drawn, and it's not a fairy tale. But the British, like so many other players in the Atlantic slave trade, showed great courage and humanity in some respects, and showed some very oppressive traits in some other respects. And so, it's true that nobody comes out painted angelically, but this is life, and so people come out, I think, in more complex hues.
You also paint a picture of the slave trade which was, really rather stupid. Not few people benefited out of it, least of all the people who ran the slave ships, who often died themselves.
Yes, the mortality rate was extraordinarily high. Mortality rate being high not just, of course, for African captives, but also for ordinary soldiers and officers, who were running these slave ships. I don't know that it was stupid in that even with the terrible mortality rate, massive profits were made, and a massive amount of wealth was created in the Americas on the backs of slaves, and so the people who were profiting probably didn't feel too stupid. But from the standpoint of Aminata, the young girl who's kidnapped at the age of 11 and taken into the slave trade, she can't believe that people have gone to all this trouble to kidnap her, make her walk 1,000 miles over 3 months across the land, get in this vessel just so that she can pick their indigo and do their bidding. She just can't believe that people have come all this distance just to steal her labor, and it's mind-boggling to her. Why don't they do it themselves? Wouldn't it be simpler than crossing the ocean to steal me, to bring me all the way back to do their labor? Why don't they just do it themselves? So this baffles her.
Why did you choose to tell this story through the eyes of a girl?
Through the eyes of a girl and a woman, as I tell it through her eyes, and she grows, from childhood into late womanhood in the novel. So really, it's told through the eyes of a girl and a woman through her life. And I'd like to locate a story in the shoes of a person who has a great deal to lose. And in the context of this story, it was a woman that I was thinking of from the word go, who she calls herself a baby catcher, which is, of course, her term for a midwife, and she endures the pain of having to catch other women's babies while losing her own children in the course of her life. And so it's very much a woman's story that I wanted to tell. And I imagined her to be my daughter, and I imagined my daughter going through these things. I gave her the name of my daughter and tried to lift her off the page by thinking of her as my own child.
You're a black yourself?
Yes. Well, yes, I am. I'm of mixed racial ancestry. My father was an African American. He passed away a few years ago, and my mother is a white American. They moved to Canada before I was born, and so I was raised in Toronto.
You've been back to Africa yourself to
I've
research
been to
this
Africa
book?
6 times.
6 times?
Yes.
And how did you find it?
It was life-changing. It was absolutely sea changes in my own life and my perception of the world, my perception of Canada in relation to the world, and my understanding of myself. They were massively influential trips that I think had a great deal to do with turning me into the writer that I became. All of the novels that I've written have in one way or another touched down on Africa. My orientation as a writer has been largely influenced by the time I've spent in various countries, in particularly West Africa.
That was Lawrence Hill, the winner of this year's Commonwealth Writers' Prize. And that's all from this edition of Pick of the Commonwealth, a production of the Commonwealth Broadcasting Association. My name is Robin White. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.